Hello everyone, Mike Silverman here. Welcome to MMORPG Devlog, Episode 1, where I share my progress developing an MMORPG for the web browser. What I did to get started on this was I went to a website called mmoblueprint.com, and this website has articles about the theory and the concepts about how MMORPGs handle large numbers of players and how you can make a seemingly seamless world even though you are using multiple computers to calculate what's happening in that world. So right here in what I've got going on here, this is a little demonstration of what I've been working on. It took me quite a while to get this working, so I, I'm pretty stoked to, that that I finally got it working. What it is showing here is three different virtual machines that are all running on my laptop. What I'm using to create these virtual machines is something called Kubernetes and Docker. Kubernetes is open source software developed by Google, I believe, that allows you to orchestrate multiple virtual machines. And it's super useful because, especially for an MMORPG, because you can either restart your virtual machines if they crash, or you can add more virtual machines or reduce the number if your traffic goes up or down, like during prime time playing hours, you might want to add more computers. Right now, though, I'm keeping it simple and I have these three computers that are what I call a zone node. So a zone node for me is something that is going to keep track of the entities, which would be the players, the monsters, uh, that are inside one area of the world. And my whole world is, for this game, for this test, is a 1000 by 1000 square. If you scroll down a little bit, you see the bottom there. And each of these zone nodes is only calculating entities that are in a certain section of that world, which I call their territory. So, for example, the 0 zone node is handling all these green entities, and the 1 zone node is handling the blue, the 2 is handling the orange. And if an entity ever goes to a place in the world that is outside of its current zone node's territory, it has to somehow be transferred over to that zone node, and that is what I've done here. Now, the way that I have figured that out is through a technology called Redis, and Redis is, well, it's originally a database, and then it became a tool with like a lot of different features. And one of those features is the publish subscribe, or they call it the pub sub messaging message thing that basically it's channels that you can either publish a message to or subscribe to messages from that channel. So each one of my zone nodes, they have their own personal channel that would be called messages for zone 0 or messages for zone 1. And each one of these zone nodes also knows about who it is next to, who its neighbors are. So in the course of calculating the position of all of its entities, if it realizes that the position of this one entity is now outside of its territory, it's going to look through its list of neighbors and see if that entity is inside the rectangle of its neighbor. And if it is, it's going to publish a message to the specific channel that is named for that zone node, which is its neighbor. So if a green dot passes over to the right here, up the top, and now it's inside where the zone number 1, then zone 0 is going to publish to the messages for zone 1 channel. You have this entity, here's all the information about it, like its speed, its position, its size, how does it like to move around, and zone 1 will be subscribed to that channel, of course, because those are the messages that it's concerned with, and it will see that, and it will say, oh, there's this entity that I should add to my list of entities, and it will do that, and then it'll be on its list, and it'll start taking control of that entity and calculating it, where it should be and how it should move and how it should interact with other entities. And at the same time, once that message has been sent by zone 0 or published, it's going to delete the entity that it published a message about from its own list so that you don't get a duplicate of entities. So this is very useful for an MMORPG because if there's so many different entities walking around and attacking things and healing, taking damage, crafting, whatever all the things you do in a game, then it's going to be too much for even the most expensive, nicest computer. So what you need to do is horizontally scale your number of computers, which just means add more computers that can handle more different sections of the world. And that's why you need this mechanism of being able to send entities across borders so you can have a seamless zone transition. In older MMORPGs, like I like to play Final Fantasy XI, that's a game where the zones in that game, when I say zone, that just means like a section of the world. If you walk to another zone, then you get a loading screen and then you get sent to another computer that's going to handle the zone you walked into. But you get that loading screen. So if you think of like World of Warcraft, where if you were, for example, in Elwynn Forest and you walked into Stormwind, now I don't know for a fact that's a different server that Stormwind is. I suspect that it is because it kind of makes sense. There's going to be a high concentration of players there. But you get seamlessly transitioned without a loading screen to Stormwind. So uh, that's what's happening here, really, is there's seamless transitions. But let's let's say you were getting the perspective of only one of these entities. Like let's say you were one of these dots, which is how it would be in the game. You would be a player. Your position would be being calculated by whatever computer, whatever zone is that you're inhabiting. And you started to walk to the edge of your zone, you would need to see an entity across that line, even though it's not an entity that is part of the computer's responsibility that you're connected to. And that is not implemented yet, so that would be my next step. So hopefully in episode 2, what I'll have is some way where these zones are going to know, oh, I have a dot or I have an entity here that's within this area. Well, that is the external area of interest of zone 1. And really all that is an area that is the distance of the maximum view distance of a player. And it's going to just send information across that border to its neighbor zone so that it can show the location of entities that are across the border to entities that are within its own border. So that way you have this illusion of a seamless world, even though it is actually separately being calculated. And what was the hardest part about making this was actually writing the calculation of determining if two rectangles are touching each other. And I thought that would be something I could just look up online and copy the code from someone else who wrote it. But I actually didn't find anything like that. So I had to write it myself here. And yeah, here it is. Luckily, I was able to get the between from somebody else. I just calculated something that determines if something's between. But yeah, I had to write all these cases to see if it was something that was northwest, southwest, west, east, north, any cardinal or ordinal direction, uh, if two rectangles were touching on that direction. So yeah, this is my code for that. This is TypeScript, and that's the main language I'm using to develop TypeScript with Node.js and React for the front end. And then I'm using Redis for the publish subscription of messages and WebSocket to send the messages from the back end to the front end because Redis can't communicate it has its own protocol. That's the Redis protocol, but web browser only understands WebSocket and HTTP. So we do need to use some WebSocket for real-time connection here to the front end. And in React, I'm also using Canvas. Canvas is how you can draw different shapes really fast, like this, kind of animate them. Um, but yeah, that pretty much covers what I've been working on so far, what I want to take my next steps as far as being able to show the bordering zones within a certain area, the entities there, so that you can see across the line, so to speak. And big shout out to Server Sid and Design Doris for writing MMOBlueprint.com. It would have been impossible for me to even get started on this project without reading these articles, and I've read the articles so many times, especially scalable MMORPG server architecture and handling large amounts of players. Highly suggested if you're interested in this sort of stuff to head over to this website and give those a read. But that'll about do it for me. This has been Mike Silverman, MMORPG Devlog, Episode 1. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.